From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Beres here on a Wednesday. We have a good show on tap for you this morning. We're going to get the phone numbers up there in just a moment. Well, wait, almost. No. Okay, look, it says Morning Line is sponsored by the Kelly firm. Yes, and we're going to be talking this morning with Clint Kelly, who is a malpractice attorney. He's sitting right next to me right here. Clint, good morning.
Good morning to you, Nick.
It's nice to have you on. It's a pleasure as always. I was going to say, there's the phone number, 737-7587. Want folks to jump in if they want to call in and ask questions about, we say malpractice, whether or not they feel they were given the treatment they should have gotten when they went to the hospital, and whether or not they have something that's actionable, or with a doctor's office, right?
Right. And medical malpractice is a term that basically encompasses any action against a doctor or a nurse or other type of healthcare practitioner. Paramedic could be one as well. Anyone who provides healthcare services who does not measure up or live up to the standard of care that's expected of them in their individual profession. And if that negligence causes injury, then someone would have a claim that's worth investigating and perhaps filing suit.
Your specialty is looking at whether or not, the key is, your specialty of course is malpractice insurance, but the key to proving it is whether or not the person you're going after, you can prove they did not live up to the standard.
Exactly.
There is a standard, there is a threshold where all medical practitioners are supposed to meet a certain level. And if you can show that they didn't, that's where you may have a case.
Exactly. There are accepted standards of care that all physicians and other healthcare providers expect of each other. And when there's been a departure or a failure to live up to that standard of care, then patients have the right to have a claim investigated. And if someone's been injured, or particularly if someone has died as a result of that negligence, they can go seek legal representation and perhaps bring a claim if an expert will support it.
It's interesting because you think about malpractice. We all want to have a positive result when you go to the doctor, and many of you sitting out there right now may be thinking of a situation you've been through or a loved one's been through, and the number's on the screen if you want to jump in. But let's acknowledge the fact, though, that there are people that will go to hospitals or doctors and have a negative result, and sometimes people die, okay? And there's no fault of the doctor. They may have done everything they possibly could have. Okay, and someone dies. Doesn't mean you have a case then.
That's correct. In fact, it's the law. The law says a bad result does not equal negligence necessarily, because the law, as well as medicine, expects that there are going to be bad results even when physicians and other healthcare providers do everything they can and still have a bad result. And that goes with a lot of professions. Lawyers as well can sometimes do the best they can to represent their client, but at the end of the day, say in a criminal case, if the client's guilty, then the client's convicted. You can't blame the lawyer if he does a good job. So what the law says is, if it's a bad result that is caused by negligence or caused by failure to live up to the standard of care, then the patient would have a legal claim worth pursuing.
Okay, and now a level of this, and maybe this is the gray area, a misdiagnosis. All right, I would imagine you're going to tell me that misdiagnosis could be actionable, or maybe is not. It's a maybe.
That's correct. Classic example would be a failure to diagnose a heart attack, where a patient goes into an emergency room with chest pain, and the person, whether it's a emergency room physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, evaluates that patient and jumps on epigastric pain or indigestion and does not rule out a heart attack as being a cause of the chest pain, and then the patient leaves the next day, dies of a heart attack. And that happens from time to time. It's very unfortunate. That's why people who work in the emergency room, they are responsible for ruling out life-threatening conditions. That's where they need to get the diagnosis correct.
That's the standard of care. They have to have that right. But in other cases where someone maybe has just a very obscure type of illness that, they don't know exactly, they do the best they can to diagnose it. Maybe they just hit it wrong, and by the time they figure it out, it's too late. I'm not sure you have a case then. It's like, well, it's a puzzle, and we didn't have all the facts. We couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I had a case, Nick, recently I had to turn down with a patient who went to a hospital, and the patient was bleeding from her stomach during the time she was in the ICU. And the doctors were really trying hard and diligently to figure out why this patient was having low blood pressure, why the patient was basically going downhill. And if they're diligently trying to figure it out, even if they get it wrong, that does not mean that there's negligence. Where you do have negligence is when there's not diligence, when best judgment is not being exercised and the injury could have been prevented. That's when there's a case.
You said it was a case you had to decline.
Correct.
So I guess we should say that you have a lot of people come through your front door or call for a consultation. You listen to it. I'm guessing you turn more away than you can accept, not because you want to, but because you find that they just don't have an actionable case.
Yeah, 90+% of cases I turn down.
Yeah, simple. But it's good for people to ask, and that's the important thing. That's one thing you can call in. Listen, I've got more questions for you, but we got some calls coming in. Before we take our first break, let's take Sierra and see what she's got on her mind. Hi, Sierra.
Hello.
Good morning. How can we help you, ma'am?
I was wondering if I had a case.
Okay, good. That's what Clint's good at figuring out. Go ahead.
Basically, in 2010, I was diagnosed with HIV. I had a test in January of that year. That doctor failed to call me to inform me that the test was positive, but I found out about 8 months later from my GYN that I was positive. At that time, I was with a partner, and I feel he was put in jeopardy along with everyone around me, just because I was failed to be informed.
Hey, was your partner infected?
Unfortunately, we still are doing tests. So far, the tests have come back negative.
Okay, good. Well, all right, so your question is then, and Clint, it sounds to me like there was a diagnosis and they did not get back to her to tell her that she was HIV positive, so she wasn't able to take certain precautions she may have taken otherwise.
Right.
All right.
She may have a claim. In fact, there's different ways to look at this. First of all, the failure to notify her is what we call a failure to warn case, and that's in the sort of a middle ground. It's not necessarily medical malpractice.
Right.
It's more of what we call a negligence case, simple negligence case, where it's a failure to report. The claim can be called also negligent infliction of emotional distress, and that would be her partner, the one who's being tested, who may or may not be infected. This is a really unfortunate situation. It happened one time at Vanderbilt. It's a reported case where a lady was getting a blood transfusion, and she got HIV through a blood transfusion. And the people at Vanderbilt knew about it and failed to report it to her. She then gets her husband infected and her child infected, and both died.
Oh, no.
It's a very, very unfortunate situation, and it's one of those where you just, your heart bleeds for people who need to know the accurate test results and need to know quickly.
What are you going to have to prove? And this is a case, if she wants to further consult with you, we'll have the information up on how you can contact his office after the show. But all right, what are you going to have to determine here if she has a case? You have to prove that the doctor knew and he just blew it off and just said, I don't have time to call, or because he may say, look, well, I thought the nurse was going to call and she thought I was going to call and it just didn't get done and it was a clerical error and who's really to blame?
Nick, it could be both of those. I mean, it sounds like it could be a system breakdown in the office, depending on where she was tested, where they rely on a certain chain of command for information to be passed and dispensed to the patient, and it's not. It could be all the reasons you said, but the bottom line is you have to have a system in place that will not break down so patients can learn this information so they don't infect their partners. That's the worst thing in the world, is that the partner doesn't know. The partner is clearly the one that's in danger here, and that's why in situations like this, disclosure and the means of disclosure has to have not only a primary process but a backup system to make sure, kind of like a pilot checklist, to make sure the communication is made and understood by the patient.
And I'm wondering, let me ask, Sierra, did you go into the doctor specifically to be tested for HIV because you were having symptoms, or did they discover this while they were doing some other medical procedure?
No, I'm just one that really cares about my body, so I'm one that do regular checkups. At that time, both of you guys, please, I'm on the phone. At that time, I had got tested just for my own reasons because I'm sexually active. So,
do you believe that's how you contracted it, through sexual contact, not through any kind of drug use or anything like that?
No, actually how I think I contracted it is actually through school. I was going to Midlands Institute for Sterile Processing Technician, and I got stuck in my hand with a pair of those scissors that I had to clean.
Oh, that may have had, oh wow, so an accidental puncture cut. Okay, well, before we go to break, and thank you for your call, and again, we'll have Clint's office information up at the end of the program. So it is though, if she goes in, so she went in and she wanted this, and she must have said, Doc, you know, I want you to do the physical, I want you to check for HIV and let me know if I'm healthy.
Right.
So at that point, is it his or her responsibility to contact the patient, or would it have been incumbent on her after 2 or 3 days to say, I wonder if that test is back, I'm going to call them? Where is her personal responsibility to follow up, or should she just sit on her hands when she hasn't heard and just leave it to the doctor? I'm just wondering, I'm trying to put myself in the juror's box, hearing you argue on her behalf and wondering, okay, well, where's the responsibility, her or on the doctor?
Okay, well, it begs two questions. First of all, when is she expected to contact the doctor if she doesn't hear, which again is something that you have to have communications, good communications with your patient so they understand what the system is. And then the second question is, how long of time would pass before the patient would be expected to call where the patient doesn't know this information? And we don't know necessarily what Sierra was told.
Yeah.
You just have to have a system in place where this information gets disclosed.
Okay, yeah, because I would say, you know, sometimes you don't get the call. Many people might just assume, oh, I'm okay.
Right.
Meaning, like, of course they'd call me if I was positive. I don't get a call, I must be clear. So you think there could be a potential case there?
Could be, yes.
All right, listen, we got to take a break on that note. Sierra, thank you for your call. It's certainly worth looking into. I'm sorry about your situation. When we come back, the phone line's open. If you're on hold, stay where you are. We'll get to those calls, and we've got some more topics to touch bases with our malpractice attorney right after this. Stay with us.